On April 29, 1998, a man sat at a heavy mahogany desk in Abuja. He held a government pen. He pulled a document toward him and signed his name. With that single signature, he transferred the drilling rights to a piece of the Atlantic Ocean called OPL 245. This was not just any piece of the ocean. It was one of the richest unexploited oil fields on the planet. It held an estimated 9 billion barrels of crude oil. He gave this oil block to a private company called Malabu Oil and Gas. The company paid the Nigerian government just $2 million for the license. Years later, that same company sold the block to Shell and Eni for $1.3 billion. Who owned Malabu Oil and Gas? The records show the company belonged to a man named Kweku Amafega. But Kweku Amafega did not exist. It was a fake name. The real owner of the company was the man sitting at the mahogany desk in Abuja. His name was Dan Etet. At the time he signed the document, he was Nigeria's Minister of Petroleum. The Minister of Petroleum awarded a $1 billion national asset to himself for pennies and then sold it for $1 billion profit. This was not a loophole, this is the Nigerian oil business. You are watching Historic Capital. This is the dossier on the oil block cartel. To steal an ocean, you do not need a navy, you need a law. In Nigeria, that law is the Petroleum Act of 1969. If you read the text of this law, it sounds very patriotic. It states that the entire ownership and control of all petroleum in, under, or upon any land in Nigeria is vested in the state. The oil belongs to the government. But the law does something very specific in Section 2. It grants the absolute power to allocate this oil to exactly one person. The Minister of Petroleum Resources. In many Western countries, if the government wants to sell drilling rights, they hold an open public auction. The highest bidder wins. The money goes to the treasury. In Nigeria, for decades, they used a system called discretionary allocation. This is a polite financial term. It means the minister can wake up on a Tuesday morning, look at a map of the Niger Delta, draw a square with a red marker, and give that square to his friend. No auction, no bidding, just a signature. Let's look at the paper trail of the 1990s. Under the military government of General Ibrahim Babangida, oil blocks were handed out as political favors. In 1993, Babangida awarded OML 127, a massive offshore oil block, to a company called Famfa Oil. Famfa Oil was not an energy company. It had no engineers. It had no drilling equipment. It was owned by Folorunsho Alakija. At the time, she was a fashion designer. She made clothes for the president's wife. A fashion designer received a multi-billion-dollar oil field through discretionary allocation. This is the mechanism of extraction. The law was not designed to protect the oil for the citizens. It was designed to package the oil for the elite. When an elite politician or his friend receives an oil block, they face a practical problem. They do not know how to extract oil. Drilling a deep water well costs hundreds of millions of dollars. They do not have the capital, but they do not need capital. They have the paper. These entities are called briefcase companies. They consist of a registered name, a briefcase, and a government license. Once they get the license, they fly to London or Houston. They sit down with the real oil operators, companies like Shell, Chevron, ExxonMobil, or Total. They propose a deal. It is called farming out. The Nigerian politician says, I own the rights to this ocean. You have the money and the rigs. You drill the oil. You take 60% of the profits. You give me 40%. The foreign oil major agrees. The foreign company takes all the financial risk. They bring the technology. They bring the engineers. The Nigerian politician takes zero risk. He just sits in a mansion in Mayfair, London and waits for the royalty checks to arrive. Let's return to the Dan Etet case, OPL 245. When Etete's secret company, Malabu, flipped the oil block to Shell and Eni in 2011, the transaction was highly sophisticated. Shell and Eni did not pay Etete directly. That would look like a bribe. Instead, they paid $1.3 billion into a Nigerian government account at JP Morgan Chase in London. Then, the Nigerian government, under the administration of President Goodluck Jonathan, authorized JP Morgan to transfer $801 million of that money directly into the private accounts of Malabu Oil. The money landed in Etite's control. How did he spend the public's wealth? Financial investigators traced the wire transfers. The money was used to buy a private jet. It was used to buy armored Cadillac SUVs. It was used to buy luxury properties in Dubai and a chateau in France. The Nigerian treasury received almost nothing. The foreign banks processed the transfers. The foreign oil companies got the oil. The Nigerian politician got the jet. The transaction worked perfectly. Not all oil blocks are given away to briefcase companies. The Nigerian government keeps a share of the largest, most productive fields. They operate these fields through the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, NNPC. The NNPC forms joint ventures, JVs, with foreign companies like Shell or Chevron. In a standard joint venture, the NNPC owns 55% or 60% of the asset. The foreign company owns the rest. Because the NNPC owns the majority, they are supposed to pay the majority of the operating costs. These payments are called cash calls. If Shell needs $1 billion to maintain the pipelines and drill new wells, the NNPC is supposed to pay $550 million. But year after year, the NNPC deliberately fails to pay. They accumulate billions of dollars in debt to their foreign partners. Why would a national oil company fail to pay its bills when it is sitting on record oil revenues? Because the debt creates a new loophole. When the NNPC fails to pay the cash calls, the foreign oil companies complain. They say, if you cannot pay us in cash, we will just take the crude oil directly to cover your debt. The NNPC agrees. They sign a modified carry agreement. This is an accounting magic trick. Suddenly, millions of barrels of Nigerian crude oil leave the shores of the Niger Delta. They bypass the federal budget completely. When the National Assembly asks the NNPC, where is the revenue for this oil? The NNPC replies, we did not sell it. We gave it to Shell to cover our debts. For decades, the NNPC operated as a financial black box. They did not publish audited financial statements. They did not install modern meters at the export terminals. No one in Nigeria actually knows exactly how many barrels of oil leave the country every day. They measure the oil after it leaves the terminal on the ships. This lack of metering is not an accident. You cannot steal what is accurately measured. You can only steal what is estimated. In the 2010s, the cartel realized that the public was getting angry about foreign companies lifting all the crude. So the politicians invented a new narrative. They called it local content. They passed laws insisting that Nigerian companies must be given a larger share of the oil business. It sounded like economic independence. But look at who the local companies actually were. Enter Diezani Alison Madueke. When she was the Minister of Petroleum, she pioneered the use of Strategic Alliance Agreements, SAAs. The NNPC transferred the rights to lift and sell billions of dollars worth of crude oil to two local companies, Atlantic Energy and Septa Energy. These companies were owned by two men, Gido Mokore and Kola Aluko. They were close associates of the minister. The agreement stated that Atlantic Energy would provide funding and technical expertise to the NNPC. In exchange, they would get a share of the oil, but investigators later discovered that Atlantic Energy had almost no technical expertise. They provided a fraction of the funding they promised, yet they were allowed to lift and sell over $1.5 billion worth of Nigerian crude oil. Where did the money go? It did not build refineries.